Hello, welcome to the audiobook of my Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds fanfic, Crimson Star Priestess. If you are enjoying this series, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe to my channel for updates. The link to the fanfic and my Discord server are in the description below. I do not own any Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds characters. I only own my original characters. I woke up a while ago, but since I was now a special agent of Sector Security, I didn't have to rush to work. You could say my work now was to patrol around New Domino City whenever I felt for it, so I had free hands on my daily schedule. I liked working as a secretary, but it got stressful multiple times, so it was somewhat of a relief not to rush back and forth like a worried chicken, not knowing where the mother hen was. I was having breakfast in my bedroom, enjoying the quiet morning. I sipped my tea as I looked out the large windows to see a gentle snowfall. February was still chilly and Valentine's Day was coming up soon. I couldn't help but think about how to celebrate it in Japan. I knew the customs where the girls gave chocolate to the boys, whether it was friendship chocolate or confession chocolate. In Sweden and several countries in Europe, we celebrated Valentine's Day by both gender giving chocolate or gifts to each other, so you could say I was facing a cultural collision. I turned my head down at the coffee table when my smartphone started ringing. I placed the teacup down and picked up the phone. Crow's name was displayed on the screen, so I answered it. Hello?
Hey, morning Estelle!
Crow's voice said.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, Crow. How are you guys doing today?
Jack and I are fine, but it looks like Yusei's a bit under the weather.
What do you mean? Is he sick? I asked, worry coursing through my body.
No, not really. When he showed up for breakfast, Jack and I noticed he looked kinda pale, and when he said he felt shivers run down his spine, we forced him back to bed. He insisted he was feeling fine, but we didn't want to hear that. He's rarely sick, but when he does get sick, well, let's just say it's not a pretty sight.
It could be the flu. You and Jack did a good job sending him back to bed.
Yeah, but listen, Jack and I'll be busy for the rest of the day, so you think you can come over and check on him?
Sure, I can do that. I'll even bring over some soup for him.
Great! I'll let him know you're coming over. Thanks, Estelle.
No worries, Crow. Tell Jack to be careful not to catch the flu, and you too.
We'll try our best, but be careful you too, okay? Make sure to wear a face mask.
Will do. See you later, I replied before I ended the call and hurried to the kitchen to start working. I made a simple chicken soup with chicken breast that I cut into small cubes, along with shredded carrots and parsnip and some pieces of celery to add flavor. My mother rarely used chicken stock cubes, but I prefer to have more chicken flavor than just the natural chicken. Once the soup was cooked, I poured it into a thermos to bring it to the garage. I also put on a face mask to protect myself from the germs emitting from Yusei. I drove to the garage and parked outside before I checked the twin doors, finding out they were unlocked. I walked inside with the thermos, seeing Crow and Jack's door runners were gone. They were obviously out on their jobs, but I was wondering when the blonde signer was going to get fired once again. I walked up the stairs to the kitchen where I found nobody. I walked up the stairs to the bedrooms and went to Yusei's closed door. I gently knocked on it to see if he was in there. Yusei? My voice was kinda muffled by the face mask. Come in, Yusei's voice caught softly from the other side of the door. I turned the handle and opened the door before stepping inside. Yusei was sitting up on the bed working on his laptop. His eyes were glassy and he looked exhausted. Why was he forcing himself to work when he was ill? Still working, even though you should rest? I commented as I closed the door behind me. I can't help it, Yusei chuckled as he looked up from the laptop. It's a little boring to stay in bed and I wanted to make some progress with the engine prototype. I get it. I nodded before I held up the thermos. I made some soup for you. Would you like some? Sure, Yusei nodded before he shut the laptop. I unscrewed the top of the thermos and held the middle-large cup as I poured the soup while Yusei set his laptop on the nightstand next to the bed. Once his hands were free, I gave him the full cup. What kind of soup is it? Yusei asked as he gently sloshed the liquid around in the cup. It's chicken soup, I explained. Chicken soup is the best cure when it comes to a cold or the flu. I chopped the chicken into tiny pieces and shredded the vegetables so it would be easy for you to swallow in case you're having a sore throat. Yusei brought the cup up to his lips and drank some of the soup. I slowly turned my eyes to the side to not stare at him while eating. That, and I didn't want to look like a creep to him because I accidentally glanced at his Adam's apple and watched it move whenever he swallowed the soup. I snapped my head up to not stare so much and spotted a photo frame on one of the shelves where Yusei kept his toolboxes. The frame held the photo of Yusei's parents and himself when he was just a toddler. It was the same picture Crow found back in the old energy reactor where I faced Roman the second time. Seeing Dr. Fudo reminded me of the brief encounter I had with him after I rescued Goodwin in the last Shadow Turbo Duel. He had been reborn as Junk Warrior, so he had been by Yusei's side for almost his whole life. But I still had a couple of questions. What happened to Yusei's mother and the rest of the Fudo family? Why did they never try finding Yusei? Heck, why didn't they try contacting him after he was announced as one of the participants and the winner of the Fortune Cup? Estelle, you okay? Yusei spoke up. I snapped out of my trance and turned back to him. Yes, I was just thinking of something. Yusei eyed me for a second, as if he was trying to figure out my thoughts. Was it about my parents? My eyes widened softly. How did you know? I saw you staring at the picture. Oh. I blushed in embarrassment before I curled some strands of my hair around my index finger. Do you think of them sometimes? Yeah. Yusei nodded as he held out the cup, silently asking me for more soup. I just wonder what kind of people they were besides the fact they were scientists. How did they meet? How did they fall in love? Who are their families? I've got so many questions, but I guess they will never be answered. I remained silent as I poured the soup into the cup and watched him drink it. I wish there was a way to give him some kind of closure or at least help him move forward a bit. Goodwin used to work for Yusei's father, so perhaps he knew a few things of the Fudo family. Goodwin looked up from his paperwork. Yusei's family? I nodded as I stood in front of his desk in his study. It was a Sunday, so he came home early, but he was literally married to work. He could barely relax for a single day, even though I often tried telling him to take it easy. Yes, you were Dr. Fudo's assistant, so perhaps you know something more about the family, I explained. Goodwin put the ink pen down on the desk and rested his elbows on the surface to intertwine his hands. And what are you so interested in knowing the Fudo family? I looked away for a second, suddenly feeling a little hesitant. I want to somehow give Yusei closure about his parents. I suspected as much. Goodwin chuckled softly before he stood up from his chair. I watched him walk to the big windows behind the desk as he looked at the half-snowy landscape. He stayed silent for a short moment, as if he was collecting his thoughts from a long-lost world. Yusei's parents' names were Ikto and Arisa, Goodwin spoke up. As you already know, but the Fudo family was quite a rich family, since they used to live in Tops. Yes, I'm familiar with the Tops part, I nodded. The Fudo family was very strict and traditional, Goodwin continued the tale. They were one of those rich families who married off their children only by arranged marriage because they didn't want their family blood to be mixed with bad blood. That went on for generations until Ikto broke the tradition. Was it because Arisa was not from a good family? I wondered. In the family's eyes, she was a commoner with bad blood. Ikto met her in the university where they both studied. Ikto mentioned a couple of times to me and Roman that what he felt for Arisa was true love. He went against his family's tradition and married her after 5 years of secret dating. His family tried setting him up with several marriage candidates, but he refused to meet them. Because of the disagreement with the family, Ikto and Arisa moved out of the family house to an apartment in another part of Tops. Arisa became pregnant with Yusei 2 years after the wedding, but it stirred up more trouble for her and Ikto. How? I asked, now standing next to Goodwin while looking at his face in the reflection of the window. Goodwin exhaled a soft sigh. When Ikto's family found out he and Arisa were expecting a boy, they wanted to take Yusei away from them after birth. What? Why? I asked in shock, not expecting that. The family wanted to keep the Fudo bloodline alive and raise Yusei to become a robot, following their rules like they are laws and not even dare to rebel against them like what Ikto did. Roman and I were at presence shortly after the birth to congratulate him and Arisa when the head of the family stormed into the room with a couple of relatives. They demanded to take Yusei with them when he was just a newborn. Roman and I helped Ikto protect Arisa as she weakly laid on the bed with Yusei sleeping on her chest. Luckily, no one got hurt and the family got escorted out by security, but not before Ikto gave them quite the lecture and threatened to put restraining orders against every single family member to protect his wife and son. Oh dear, I mumbled in disbelief, feeling both terrified and sad that Yusei's family was so extreme. Seeing how bad the situation was, Roman and I offered a place for Ikto and his family to stay in our house while they were looking for another place to live, Goodwin explained. They accepted the offer and stayed there for a couple of months before they found a house in a calm neighborhood far away from Tops. It was nice of you and Roman to offer them a safe place, I smiled softly. But did the families there try to get Yusei? Yes, but they already had the restraining orders in place, so they were often arrested until they finally gave up. However, because of how persistent the family was, Ikto and Arisa brought Yusei to work instead of keeping him at home with a babysitter. That is how Ikto was able to send Yusei to a safe place before the meltdown. After the incident, the Fudo family left New Domino City because they proclaimed they didn't want to live in an unsafe place anymore. From what I've heard, They never attended Ikto and Arisa's funeral, and they didn't even bother to look for Yusei. That's so cruel. I bit my lower lip as I felt tears accumulate in my eyes. How could a family discard a family member just because they refused to follow their ideals? I quickly wiped the tears away before they could run down my cheeks. Perhaps it's best for Yusei to never associate with that family. I couldn't agree more. Goodwin nodded and turned to me. After I left Satellite, I worked my way to the top of Sector Security to not just prepare everything for the battle with the Dark Signers, but I also took the liberty of looking for Ikto and Arisa's belongings. Huh? I mumbled in disbelief. Belongings as in... Notes specifically for the reactor and possibly personal possessions I knew were related to them, Goodwin explained. I believed that Yusei was still alive, so I scavenged everywhere to find all I could with the help of different contacts. Many of their possessions were lost after Zero Reverse, but I found enough that I think might give Yusei a better picture of who his parents were. And where are they now? I asked. They are stored in a private safe deposit box in the bank, Goodwin replied. If you want, I can give you access to retrieve them so you can give them to Yusei. Yes, please, I nodded, feeling determined. I want Yusei to find peace with himself. Goodwin walked back to his desk and grabbed a piece of paper to write something down. He then opened a drawer and grabbed a traditional key, clearly the key to the deposit box. He put the key on the piece of paper and folded it before he gave them to me. Bring these to the bank and give them my name. Goodwin gave me some instructions. They will know what they have to retrieve. I will. I nodded and held the folded paper on my bust. Thank you, Goodwin. I wanted to give the items to Yusei much sooner, but I barely had any spare time to leave my post for the last few months, Goodwin confessed. I will leave the rest in your hands. Yes, sir. I lightly saluted to show him I was determined to complete this mission. My adoptive father gave me a warm and honest smile, which was rarely seen even for my eyes. You are fond of Yusei, are you not, Estelle? Yes, I am. I confessed and held the folded paper close to my mouth to hide my smile and heated cheeks. He is very important to me. Goodwin released a chuckle coming deep from his chest. I wouldn't be surprised if something blossoms between you two in the future. We'll see about that, I replied before I excused myself. I walked out of the study and gently shut the door behind me. I let out a soft sigh, feeling a little conflicted after hearing Goodwin's assumption. I had no idea how much time I had left in this world, so it might not be best to pursue a relationship with Yusei. I clapped my cheeks to snap out of my negative thoughts. If I couldn't be with him in the end, the least I could do was supporting him to the best of my abilities. I waited a week for Yusei to recover after he got a fever the day after I saw him. Once I was certain he was completely fine, we agreed to meet up by the viewpoint at the outskirts of New Domino City. Yusei had already arrived when I got there. He was looking at the view before he heard my runner and turned around as I parked next to his motorcycle. I took my time to get off and opened the seat compartment to grab a cardboard box with the items I had retrieved from the bank. Hi Estelle, Yusei greeted softly and then glanced curiously at the box in my hands. Hi Yusei, I greeted back as I walked up to him. How are you feeling today? Better? Yes, Crow and Jack looked after me while I had the fever. I guess I got sick because I was lightly dressed in the garage. Yeah, the garage got quite cold during the winter. I guess you didn't think about it because you fell into a trance while working, I giggled softly. That's pretty much the truth, Yusei confessed with a tiny, cheapish look. So, why did you want to meet up here? And what's with that box? I suddenly felt nervous about the upcoming truth. Would Yusei appreciate to hear about the family story or think I was a creep for looking things up? No, I was his friend. I did all this for him so his heart could be somewhat at ease concerning his family. I took a deep breath through my nose before making eye contact with Yusei. Yusei, remember when you told me how you had questions about your parents? Yeah? Yusei nodded confusedly. I took the liberty of asking Goodwin if he knew more about your mother and father, I confessed. He told me quite a lot about them and the Fudo family. He knew more of my father besides just being an assistant? Yusei said in surprise. I nodded slowly. It's a long story, so I think we should sit down for this. Yusei and I settled down on a bench with the box between us. I literally told him everything Goodwin told me. I told him about the strict Fudo family and how his father went against them and married Arisa, and how they moved out of Tops when the family threatened to take him away from his parents as a newborn. Yusei listened silently as I told him more about his parents and some of their background. He didn't say a single word for a while after I was done. I let him comprehend everything, so I remained silent and enjoyed the view of the city and the clear sky. I never once imagined father's family was that strict. I had the feeling he was strict as a person when I met him for the first time, but he went against them to marry my mother. He must have really loved her. He did, I nodded, and I'm really glad he fought for you. Who knew where you have been or what kind of man you have become by now if you had stayed with the Fudo family? I'm sure I too would have gone against them at some point. I want to decide my own future and who I want to be with. I don't want anyone to write a script for me to follow and satisfy someone else's desire. Everyone deserves the freedom to choose what they want to achieve in life, I agreed. Yeah, as for now, I will compete in the WRGP, but I don't know what I want to do in the future. You'll find your answer someday, I'm sure of it. Do you know what you want to do, Estelle? He caught me off guard with that question. It had been a while since I thought about what I wanted to do. Back in my world, I worked part-time at a cafe, but I never really thought about what I wanted to achieve in my life. I never really put much attention on what I wanted to do back in my world, I confessed. I worked at a cafe before coming here, but I kinda had a desire to write books with made-up characters that were based on me and share my experience of bullying and setbacks in children's books for children with special needs. That's a very selfless thought of you, Yusei smiled. I'm sure there are many children who seek for someone they can look up to and gain a ray of hope after reading how you made it through your childhood and feel like they are not alone with their own problems. I smiled hesitantly before I looked down on my lap, twiddling my fingers. But now, I'm not really sure. If I happen to stay here in your world, even after my duty is done, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to rely on Goodwin forever. A career as a professional duelist could be more of a backup if I don't find out what I want to achieve. I could write the children books, but I'm still hesitant if it can bring me a safe income. Being an author feels like a lottery. You don't know if you will ever strike gold. Maybe you can be an author on the side while you have a main job? Yeah, that could work. I've heard from interviews they've got another job while they write during their free time. I think I could keep working as a mechanic, maybe come up a way to improve dual runners and dual discs. I knew Yusei's future was going to end up differently after the duel with Zone, if the future antagonist would ever make an appearance. At this point, I had no idea what could happen next. Zone might never show up, so the ending could turn out to be the same as in the dub version. A breeze reminded me of the cold weather. We couldn't stay out here much longer. Besides, I didn't want Yusei catching another cold after he had just recovered. I think we should go to a cafe to warm ourselves up. My body is almost turning into a popsicle. Yeah, I certainly don't want to catch a cold again, Yusei chuckled. But what's with this box you brought with you? I grabbed said box after we stood up from the bench. Goodwin managed to find some items that belonged to your parents after the city was rebuilt. It's not much, but he had a hunch you were still alive, so he kept them safe for you. He asked me to give them to you. Yusei's eyes widened and blinked them to make sure he had heard me right. He glanced down at the box that was sealed with duct tape. My parents' stuff? I nodded to verify that and held the box out to him. It might not answer all of your questions, but I hope it can help you find closure. He had a conflicted expression, but Yusei swallowed it down and reached his hands to take the box. I noticed his arms were shaking like he was about to grab a TNT. This must have been a shock for him that they were intact items that belonged to his late parents. I would have felt the same if I were in his shoes. He took the box and kept staring at it. I'm going to check this later. Take your time, I patted his shoulder. I know it must have surprised you. Yusei gave me a silent nod, his eyes never looking away from the box. I didn't know if I should stay with him or leave him alone to process everything. Do you want me to give you some space? No. Yusei shook his head, finally snapping out of his trance. I want you to stay. I'm afraid to be left alone right now. For a mere second, his expression reminded me of a little child who was about to face one of his worst fears in life. This was clearly a big moment for him. I swiftly turned away and sneezed when I felt a familiar tickling sensation in my nose. It was just another reminder of the cold winter weather. Yusei chuckled at my sneeze. Let's hurry to the cafe before we both end up catching a cold. I blew my runny nose. Yeah, I'm in desperate need for a nice cup of hot tea. We drove back to the Fountain Plaza and went to Café La Jean to thaw ourselves with hot drinks. We barely spoke since I was still in the middle of processing what Estelle told me about my late father's family and the fact that there were items that once belonged to my parents existing after Zero Reverse. I had no idea what those were because I still hadn't opened the box. I was almost afraid opening it and see what was left behind for me to inherit. We left the cafe when we were done with our drinks. Our runners were parked next to the garage and were coated in a thin layer of fresh snow. Estelle walked to her runner and brushed the snow off with the back of her hand before she opened the seat compartment and picked up her helmet. "You say?" She spoke up with a quiet voice. "Yeah, I asked while I brushed the snow off my runner. I hope I didn't offend you in any way. I looked over my shoulder with a raised eyebrow. Why do you say that? Estelle sighed and placed her helmet on her runner. I wanted to help you find answers of your family, but if you think I was prying too much, let me know, okay? I've never done this for someone before, so I don't know if I overstepped any boundaries. I recognized her change of mode. She doubted herself again, or she was just confused. The more time I spent with her, the more I began figuring out how she functioned as a woman with autism. She must have done so many different things that were obviously outside of her comfort zone ever since she came to this world, but it looked like she was fine because she rarely showed any expression. She tried to remain strong, but she would then remove the walls around her when she returned to her safe zone, as she had once described for me. I gently took hold on Estelle's left shoulder and turned her around. She looked at me with big, confused eyes before I embraced her. I pressed her close to me, but not too tight so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. You say? She mumbled against my shoulder. Thank you, Estelle. I truly appreciate it. I feel like my soul has found some peace after learning about my family. Seriously, thank you. I felt a gentle chuckle coming from Estelle before she wrapped me with her arms. I'm glad I was able to help you, you say. Holding Estelle like this, after everything I heard about my family and the emotions I experienced today, suddenly felt so right. She was like a teddy bear I could hold on and get some comfort, but she wasn't a plushie. She was the woman who went through this to find out about my family for my sake. My heart almost sank in joy as I held her. Is this how father felt like whenever he held mother? I didn't get the same feeling when I sometimes hugged Aki. It only happened with Estelle. Is this what they call love? I didn't know back at that time. I had never experienced love before. I never had a crush on someone as a kid. Heck, I didn't feel anything when Kalin once forced me to flip through a porn magazine back when we were the Enforcers, or when we played Drunken Truth and Dare and Crow kissed me due to his dare. I had always been focused on building stuff and being in my own world with machines. Whatever this feeling I had whenever I was close to her, I wanted to cherish it and find out what love actually meant. Then I would surely understand what made Estelle special in my eyes. She took a short step back. I let her go and looked in her eyes with a gentle smile. She smiled back with flushed cheeks. I have to go now. Will you be fine on your own? Yeah, don't worry about me, I reassured her. I've calmed down now. She looked suspiciously at me before she shrugged, her breath of sigh turning visible in the cold air. I trust you for now. If you need anything, I'm one phone call away. After I watched her drive away, I pushed my runner inside the garage and pulled the shutter down. Jack and Crow weren't home, so I brought the box to my bedroom where I could finally open it with only my pair of eyes as witnesses. Exhaling a deep breath, I opened the box. It was just like what Estelle said. It contained very few items. I found a small bunch of paper with yellow corners that had aged over the years. I studied them and realized those were notes related to the energy reactor that my father had written. There were formulas and theories that he must have worked on, but never got a chance to finish them. I put the bunch next to me, deciding to study them later. The second and last item surprised me the most. It was an old photo album with a folk's fur cover. I picked it up and could quickly tell by the weight it was full of photos. I dropped the empty box on the floor and set out the album on my lap. My heart started beating several miles per hour. I was about to uncover a real treasure of my family. I hesitantly flipped open the photo album and got presented by dozens of pictures of my parents and me as a baby. I flipped through each page, seeing photos of me when I started crawling, standing up, and even walking. My parents were always smiling whenever they were in the picture. There were a few of father cradling me in his arms, and he smiled at me like I was his precious creation he had ever made, even though he looked tired and had black bags under his eyes. Mother kissed me in some of the pictures, and there were a few selfies of both my parents kissing my baby cheeks and me giggling by their affection. There was even one of us standing outside of a 2-story house labeled Our Forever Home, with me as a bundle in mother's safe embrace and father's side hugging her. My eyes teared up the more pictures I saw. I made it to the final page where there were photos of me and my family celebrating my first birthday with the Goodwin siblings before Roman got possessed by the Earthbound Immortals. I closed the album and let a few tears run down my cheeks. I was overwhelmed by many emotions. I might have not received all answers to my questions, but I've got some kind of closure and clarity. I knew it before, but now it was verified. I was loved by my parents. I got to thank Goodwin for finding the photo album and those notes father had left behind. And I got to thank Estelle too. She went beyond and found out so much about my family for my sake, so I could find peace with myself. I wiped my tears with my knuckle and sobbed lightly to hold back my runny nose. Thank you for loving me, Father, Mother. A knock echoed from my door before Crow poked his head inside. Hey, you say, I'm gonna grab a bite. You wanna have? He stopped when he saw my teary face. Are you okay? I sniffled and nodded, not caring if my face was a mess. Never better, Crow. Never better.